Hello, everyone. Welcome to our leadership panel. I'm Jenn Grauso, Director of Leadership and Career Development at St. John's University. And here with us today, we have four wonderful panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves. Please start by telling us your name, your current title, and your place of employment. And we can start with Jim.
My name is Jim Oddo. I am the Borough President of Staten Island, and I am President of the Fred Cerullo Fan Club.
There we go.
Welcome, thank you. Shahla?
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here today. I'm Shahla Akbari. I'm Senior Director of Chapter Support at the National Society of Leadership and Success. And I, too, also would like to be the Vice President of the Fred Cerullo Fan Club.
You got to save me.
Thank you. And Kristine, welcome.
Hi, I'm Kristine Garlisi. I'm the Chief of Staff at the Nicotra Group. I'm the Executive Director of the Lois and Richard Nicotra Foundation. And Fred, I will save you, but I am going to say I'm the founding member of the Fred Cerullo Fan Club. Going back, and Fred, when I share that I was on this panel, I'm going to share a picture of us from 1991 when I was a high school senior, and you gave me an award when you were a councilman. So it might not be before Jim knows you, but it's one of my most precious pictures. I love that.
At the pavilion on the terrace, if I remember. Yep. That's crazy. Well, yes.
All right, Fred, it is finally your show.
I'm Fred Cerullo. I am currently the President and CEO of the Grand Central Partnership Business Improvement District. I am also currently a sitting City Planning Commissioner representing our Borough President, Jim Oddo, and I'm really happy to be here today and to see all of you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for joining us. So we will start today by just asking, to me, the obvious. This past year has been a challenge. We'll just say that. So given the challenges of this past year, how do you keep your team motivated despite any obstacles or conflicts that may arise? Anyone can take.
Let me say this. It's an excellent question, but in a way, the answer doesn't start in this moment in time. The answer actually begins with how you came to have your team and the personality and the experiences of your team at the time they were hired. So for me, it wasn't like I was starting in a place that was unfamiliar, even though these are unprecedented times. I selected people to be part of the team because they were self-motivated, they had leadership skills, and they wanted always to be working on behalf of what our mission is. All of our missions are, well, in a way, we all serve the public, but the specific issues are different. So this has obviously been a very difficult period. The work that we do, which is to support the business community, the people who live in the district, the people who visit the district, and obviously work here, we've been motivated to do that always. And I think what happened in this period was we saw a greater need to try to do even more. We as discouraging as the times are, and as much loss as we all have experienced, both personally and professionally, this was actually a period of time where we just had to remind ourselves what our mission was, and everybody stepped up to the plate. But it didn't take more money. It didn't take easier hours, although all those things played a role in getting through this period. But what it took was drawing on the skills and the personalities and who the employees were, and just stick together. We were in it together. And I think, teamwork is always the best way to accomplish it. So for us, that's really how it's played out. Reminding ourselves we were a team, reminding ourselves of our mission, and then letting everybody bring themselves to the table, which is why they were hired in the first place.
I love that, Fred. And I love also, in a sense, you flipped the question, because Jenn, it's a great question, but aren't we motivated by our team? You know, it's not about us motivating the team. It's a reciprocal conversation, and it's about being motivated by the team. And I know when this started, Lois and Richard Nicotra said we have to think of what's most important to us. And what's most important is that our team is healthy. So every decision we made was, the framework was, is this keeping our team safe? Because without us, and I consider myself, you know, we're all team members. And in the hospitality industry, that's what we call ourselves, team members. And that's really the focus. I love what you said, Fred.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love those points. And, you know, what rings true for me is there's nothing like a common goal or, you know, even a challenge or a crisis to rally everyone around. And, you know, it definitely starts with having the right people at the table to begin with. And really just motivating and staying positive along the way. And I think it's important, even in tragedy and crisis, to point out just, you know, what's one silver lining for the day? What's one positive thing? And keeping everyone's eye on what we can extrapolate as that positivity and towards that end vision and goal, I think has been really, really important in managing just 2020, 2021 now at this point, and just all of the challenges that we have faced. And, you know, ultimately, if everyone knows what their purpose on a team is and where they can step up and how they can contribute, and everyone understands clearly what the goal is, then people rise to that occasion. And I've been really lucky in managing my team through all of this, that they have just stepped up in amazing ways. And we've allowed them the room to step up and just been really clear on what that goal is. And the goal is everyone has to be good. We have to have that common, end to navigating all of this. And everyone has to stay healthy, to Kristine's point, such a great point. We have to take care of ourselves, and we have to, in our case, take care of our chapters and make sure our leadership program is offered. I think we're in a unique position as a leadership organization to lead by that example as well. So, while I wouldn't wish to relive any part of this crisis, it's shown a lot, and it's shown us a way to step up and achieve a lot of amazing goals in a situation that we never thought we would achieve.
I want to go back to something Fred said, and I think it's about everything that you've put into those relationships up until the point where the crisis starts. So I'm a big believer and a big fan of the saying, culture is an artifact of relationships. So the culture that exists in your group is everything that you've tended to over the previous several years. And at Borough Hall, what we've tried to do is treat people as human beings. And we try, frankly, to blur the line between the business and the personal. We're invested in each other as human beings, first and foremost. And, why reinvent the wheel? Look at organizations that do things really well. So you look at Google, and they did their Project Aristotle, trying to figure out what creates the best team. And it kept coming back to this, psychological safety. Create a culture in your group where folks are not afraid to come up with an idea, not afraid to throw something against the wall. And that leads to this open-mindedness. It leads to a resilience. And frankly, that resilience is in our DNA here at this Borough Hall. And so when the tough times come, as unique as they were, we're ready for it. When you represent Staten Island at any level, you have to get used to running headlong into the wall, getting knocked down, picking yourself up, and doing that multiple times a day. And at the end of the week, you hope that you move the wall an inch. So that resilience is part of who we are. And when that's cultivated over a period of time, well, now when you are up against it, folks are ready for it. And to the earlier point about defined roles, everyone knows their role at this Borough Hall, and everyone is empowered. So while we all might have been disoriented in those first several weeks scrambling around, you eventually find your groove. You know your role. You know that you're empowered. You know that if you make a mistake, it's not going to be the end of the world. No one's going to be yelling and screaming. And I just think that you have to tend to that garden all along. And then when the crisis hits, you're as best situated as you possibly can be.
And Jim, that's such a great point. And cultivating that environment where folks are not only feeling safe and comfortable to come to you and just be themselves and say, here's what's going on, and what I always try to do in my day-to-day is lead by that example, just being real. Hey, I didn't sleep last night. I have a baby at home and I'm still showing up 100%. It's never an excuse, right? But it's always just an opportunity to be real and to say, hey, even though work is a big part of our lives, it's still a part of our lives. And leading that type of culture to be authentic and encourage everyone to be you, I think that has really been a major factor in navigating this past year, because folks can say, listen, I did have a rough day, and a lot of folks through this pandemic have been impacted by tragedy, just awful things. And to be able to resonate with them, empathize with them, and be present to them has been such an important factor in supporting individuals on our team, towards success and towards just feeling safe and at home at work and able to do what they got to get done at work, and then also be balanced enough to take care of what they have to take care of at home.
Yeah, so you all brought up really good points. And what I love is that you all talked about your team and the people. So my next question is, how do you find those people? What are the attributes that you look for that you say, I just know this person is a leader, or this person will be a successful leader and will be a good fit for your team in any situation?
Well, that's a really good question, and I will answer it as a person who generally has gotten it right, but not always. And I mean, to be honest, sometimes I have made a mistake, or maybe I didn't make a mistake, but the person just didn't turn out to be the right fit. Not that they weren't valuable, but it didn't work. So I think if I, this is such a specific question to get into like details of what you see. Sometimes some of it you can't write down. There's like something organic about it. It's a feeling, right?
Yeah.
But I would think that obviously experience is very important, right? Somebody's experience, what they bring to the table, the expression we've used a few times already today, and their communication skills, their ability to communicate and how they, whether it's to describe themselves, what they've done, what they're thinking about the future, how they would handle a situation, whatever the process is that you're going through with a candidate. I have learned that it's really important to accept what you're getting at the moment and not to believe that the person is going to be different at another time. So what you get, the first impression, as unfortunate as that may be, does have a real impact on the selection process or how you connect to a person. The last thing I would say is their sense of sort of the interpersonal skills, whether there's a relaxation. I mean, you have to trust that everybody might be a little nervous coming in, depending on where they are in their lives and their careers and whether you know them or not. But I think they're watching their body language, watching their comfort level, the way they think while you're asking them a question. It all actually ends up mattering very much. Awkwardness is generally a personality trait. And if it's, the role, it may not matter. If it's somebody's going to be at their desk all day and do data processing, then Whether they're a little awkward, it won't matter. But if it's somebody that's going to interact with other people in the office or other businesses or the public, then you may have to weigh that. So I look at interpersonal skills. I look at their communication skills and their experience. But, different jobs require different analysis. Are they writer? Are they going to be writing? So you'd have to look at that. But I think generally you get the take of a person within the first few minutes of talking to them. And hopefully they're there because their resume is such that that part of the process gets them to meet with you. And then from there, it's about what goes on in between the two of you or the group, whoever is doing sort of the vetting process.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot that goes into every role, and it very much depends on what that role is. I get asked this question quite a bit. I interview quite a bit, and I always joke with candidates that I'm like, okay, where do you want me to start? There is a laundry list of things I'm about to fire away. And I believe that by setting high expectations, people do rise to those expectations, and setting them up front and candidates knowing right on the top of an interview what they're getting into. That's an important thing to do. Even with all of that, it boils down to three things for me that I really follow my gut on in connecting with candidates. Number one, I have to be able to trust that person. So am I going to entrust this person doing the role with minimal oversight? And a lot of that does factor in to communication. So Fred, I love that you called that out, because proactive communication, managing up, is going to be key. I would say work ethic is another thing you can't teach. There are the types of people who just are going to, where possible, go above and beyond. And I really prefer candidates that are going to want to do that, where you don't have to pull them back. They're driven, they're motivated to want to do more, learn more. And ultimately, we don't want it to be transactional, where it's like, hey, I asked you to do one extra thing, and therefore you're kind of really dragging through that extra thing. We want that ability to have a really strong work ethic, but also know that balance, right? Because I really don't love to see folks burn out when they do have strong work ethics, and I've seen that quite a bit. And then the last piece is that talent and the drive to learn based on that talent. So I do believe that wherever someone falls into their line of work, it usually is coming from somewhere, some sort of mission, some sort of, hopefully passion or life goal to fall into that line of work. But you have to be a lifelong learner in that. You can't come in saying, yep, I'm good. I'm trained up. I know how to do this perfectly. I don't think there's ever been any professional to have that occur to them. And so they have to understand they come in with that talent, but they also want to be, they want to learn, and they need to be hungry to learn along the way, and recognize that they don't know everything, ask for the feedback, and want to develop and grow from there.
Good, Kristine.
Well, Jim, I know you're an avid reader, and I have to say a lot of the books you shared I've enjoyed, and I think lifelong learning is certainly such an important point. And I think I'm going to just flip this a little bit again and say that, having taught as an adjunct professor at St. John's for 15 years, one of the things I often share with students is, if you stop learning the moment you cross the graduation stage, you will not be an interesting professional. So you might be competent, you might know enough to get the job, but you're not going to grow. And then the other thing I share with them is that hiring is a two-way relationship conversation. So, to your point, Fred.
Yes.
You're not going to go on a first date with someone and say immediately, oh, I just don't like the way he dresses or speaks, or, and start to think about all the ways you can change them. So as someone hiring, I'm not going to do that. And on the flip side, the candidate shouldn't do it either. So they shouldn't come in and see, for example, our work environment is driven by Hilton's corporate culture. So we are perhaps our attire might not be what everybody wants to envision their days. So if you are someone who wants relaxed, dressed down attire, if you go into this corporate culture, you're not going to change us. We might change over the years a little bit, but I think that what you see is what you get, and that goes both ways. So if you're sitting across the table as a student, as a candidate, and thinking, this doesn't feel like me, go with that. And if you're thinking this feels like me, tell the person interviewing you why it feels so good to you to be there.
I wanted to stand up and pump my fist like a sporting event when I heard you say the phrase lifelong learner, because I think for me that is the key, because from that emanate, I think, all the other qualities that we would want in a teammate. So if you are a lifelong learner and you are curious, inherent in that is that you understand that you don't know everything. And it's hard not to have humility once you accept and are willing to embrace the fact that there's so much more to learn. So now the humility is in place. We don't have to worry about ego. Don't have to really worry about self-centered sort of mentality. And when you are a lifelong learner, you realize the value and the importance of listening. You work at the skill of listening. You try to stop the inner monologue and you actually listen to the person who's talking so that you can respond to what she or he is saying, not the canned line that you have next. And comes that, I heard the word empathy earlier, comes that it's hard not to be empathetic when you are actively and sort of fiercely listening to someone. It's hard not to have the right mindset, the growth mindset, the beginner's mindset when you are engaged in all of those things. It's hard not to, when you learn something, to have that sense of awe, which gives you then that sort of, your path to wisdom. It's hard not to have all of those skills that we would want in a teammate if they have embraced the notion of, I'm here to get better, I'm here to learn. Tell me how to learn. So if in a interview or in a conversation, when you come across folks who embrace that, bells go off in my head, because I want to learn from that person. I want to sort of understand their process more. And if there's an opportunity to bring them on this team, that's a really good thing. I am a big believer in the school of thought that says, AI is coming, and even if it's not coming to the degree that people think it might be coming, the changing dynamics of the workplace mean that the emotional intelligence skills, the ability to adapt, the ability to collaborate is critical. And the way we operate this building, I love input from lots of different people. So the ability to collaborate is crucial. And I just think that that's the trend in the workplace, and I think that will be the growing trend. So I remember, and I'll end this. I'll end it with this. I remember being in the last day of a class at Fordham. Dr. George Gill, who I've had 4 or 5 classes, history professor, this kind, brilliant, lean, older gentleman, trying to instill in us and telling us about, this is 1985, telling about his own mother who would sit with the grandchildren trying to learn the new math, because she was a lifelong learner in her way. And it stayed with me. I can't remember yesterday, but I remember Dr. Gill making a point of that. And I just think it's something I try to live my life by, and I try to surround myself with folks who embrace that as well.
I think a really good indicator of that lifelong learning mentality, and this goes back to something you said, Kristine, is that interviewing is a two-way street. So if I were to recommend anything to someone, just getting out into the world of interviews, it would be ask a lot of questions, and not just a lot to ask them. I think that's always apparent to the interviewer when you're just firing away what you think they want you to ask, but ask a truly insightful question. And it comes down to doing the research, really thinking about that fit. Kristine, I love how you said kind of it's that fit. Does it feel right? Thinking about what would I want to be doing in this role, and asking really insightful, thoughtful questions, and having that collaboration right off bat. And I think, as someone sitting in as the interviewer, that's a great insight into, are they curious? Do they get it? Do they really want, what the true day-to-day of this role is going to be? And that's a real indicator. Sometimes some of my interviews will end up being almost 50-50. Right. So it is that true.
As it should be, right?
Just exactly turning it right over. Hey, I'm in the hot seat now. And it provides great insights into those candidates.
I'm unemployed in fewer than 250 days. So I'm literally taking notes. So I need to do my work and then ask as many questions of them as they will of me.
Oh, I like being interviewed in interviews. Yeah. Especially if I'm in a process of finding somebody, because it's the same process, and that's when it goes back to the skills of the person, the communication skills, the interpersonal skills. You get to actually know the person a little, because it's scripted from the employer. There's a scripted nature to it. And you may have done this now 5 times, and you're thinking about it as being like, in a way, it's not a fair process. But when you become engaged, it's a very different thing. And that's where the conversation happens. You might learn something about the person that would never have come up in a direct question from the potential employer. And I agree wholeheartedly with you on that, Shahla, completely.
And, we're in the hospitality field, and even our real estate is hospitality, because we want the tenants to feel like kings and queens. So, the Nicotras have taught me that every meeting we should leave with a smile. And so, even an interview, and as nervous as you might be or anxious, there's a real opportunity there to connect. So don't miss the opportunity to connect on a human level.
I was laughing, Jim. I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that when you talked about your Professor Gill, who was an older gentleman in the 80s, he was younger than you are now, just for the record.
Ouch.
Maybe he's not the president of the fan club anymore now, for all you know.
Will the vice president please assume the...
Can I get promoted here?
Yeah, I will say this, the continuous... We have a saying here, it's continuous improvement. And the continuous learning grows out of, you can't do continuous improvement unless you're continuously learning. And listening to the conversation, and I agree with everything you all said, I kind of smiled, because I remember saying something once to my niece and nephew, who are now in their 20s, leaving my sister's house when they were probably 6 or 7 years old. And I left on a Sunday night after dinner, and I said, I have to go home and do my homework. And they both started laughing out loud. And they said, Uncle Freddie, you don't have to do homework. And I said to them, I sat with them, I said, homework never ends. It never ends. It has a different form, but I'm going home to do my homework. And to this day, we joke about that. When I'm leaving the house, they're 24 and 25. Are you going to do your homework? I said, yes, I'm going home to do my homework.
Can I jump off on that? Because one of the things I think that I've learned, and I think leaders need to learn, is the days of the glorifying the executive or the leader who claimed that he or she did like 3 all-nighters and they've done 110-hour work weeks this week. I think those days are over. And the notion of when I was in the city council, every single minute of my schedule was packed. And it took me a long time to realize that is so counterproductive. And building that space in to your schedule. I call it the power of no. Learning the ability to say, no, I'm not going to that nonsensical event. That's not helping the people of Staten Island. They're going to have to do without seeing me there. And building space into your schedule as a leader to either process the meetings that you've had, prep for the meetings that are coming, or just giving yourself 15 minutes, a half hour, an hour to go into the default state to stir up the creativity. That's part of the learning that I think that all of us are talking about. I think the notion of being back-to-back Zoom calls, and I think that's why one of the reasons why this last year, in many ways, has been tougher, because it became so easy to say, "Oh yeah, we'll just do another Zoom call," and it was back-to-back Zoom calls, and there was no time to sort of sit back, look at the big picture, sit back and plot, sit back, move the chess pieces, and I think it's hard, particularly like when you're hardwired the way I think the five of us are, to go. It's hard to say no. I need to build space into that schedule to see the board, to think, or just to veg out, to let creative juices flow.
I want to take that, and I like that, Jim, and move that into a question about, for our students who are listening, what should they be doing now? What can they be doing to prepare to be future leaders? We heard what you're looking for, but I want more advice like what Jim just gave us.
Well, a big piece of advice that I give is, and this is so easy, we all spend a lot of time on social media, more than we'd like to admit. So I'm not going to say you shouldn't, but what I'm going to say is follow people in your industry, follow thought leaders in your community. And in a way, it's almost like putting vitamins in your diet without even knowing it. So as you scroll, you're getting good information, good tips. I don't care if it's a TikTok video, but you're just getting some enrichment as you're spending time online. So if you want to be a journalist, are you following some premier journalists locally and nationally, internationally? If you want to be a community leader, are you following other community leaders? And put a diversity in who you're following, so that you're not getting one side of things. And the other thing I will say is surround yourself with optimistic people. One of the moments that I honestly think I will think about for the rest of my life during this pandemic is early on in the pandemic last spring. I was running around the hotel, checking in with people, and Lois and Richard Nicotra sent a message to all of the managers, and it said, "The flowers are blooming outside. So as busy as your day is today, and for as much stress as we have right now, make sure you and your staff walk outside and look at the flowers." If I tell you, first of all, find me a boss who's going to tell you to go outside and smell the roses in a pandemic, so that our mindset was calm. So those are my two things. Find good people to follow online that enrich you and teach you. And the other thing is surround yourself, both online and in real life, with optimistic. Realistic doesn't mean you're naive if you're optimistic. It just means you're fighting to find the good. So surround yourself with those people, and even better, work with them and for them.
What she said.
Yeah, that.
It was like the perfect, it really was. It was, Kristine, that was like awesome. And you started with social media, which is what was in my head too, which is don't stop it. You can't stop it. It's part of the world, and you have to be engaged in it to some degree.
Yes.
But it cannot be your life. And the other thing I think is sort of old-fashioned communication is also not harmful. I know it might seem not cool, but writing the letter, just sending the thank you note, even old style, which I know seems probably horrific, is especially now because it's something that will help you stand out. At one point it just was polite, and now it's like a standout issue. And, to kind of draw on what helps you stand out in that scenario. It isn't just a quick email saying it was great to meet you like 5 minutes ago, which they know you did in the elevator. You know what I mean? And so take a minute to get a stamp and send a personal note. I'm overly impressed by that when I get something handwritten, even if it's 2 sentences. And it's a little old school for sure. But there is something about engaging in that way than a quick kind of text will ever do or help you stand out.
Yeah, I am. All of that. Still taking that advice, I want to say. I would say, when and this goes a little bit back to Jim, your comment, when I see young students that are aspiring leaders, they're often in everything all of the time. And it's almost a predecessor to what they're going to be in their future careers. They haven't learned to prioritize, say no, step back. So I would say, while anyone is still young and still figuring out their careers, there's a lot of experimentation. There's encouragement, try different avenues, try different things. That's going to be important. But also, before you put your hand in everything and burn yourself out doing 5 different sports, 5 other extracurriculars, overloading on coursework, just trying to keep it all together, take a step back and think about just a general direction of what makes you happy, what's going to make you tick. And it might not lead you to your perfect future position and career. That might take some calibrating along the way. But step back and think about what those priorities are, because that's going to help guide you and teach you that skill of learning what you want to lean into and learning where, you might put your foot in the water a little bit, but where you're not going to focus all of your time and energy. I think not being overly involved and instead being really intentionally involved in a few different things is a better way to get yourself there. And, it still allows for experimentation, but it avoids the over involvement that we see with a lot of top achieving young students, young adults these days. And that's my biggest piece of advice. The other thing I would say is that taking things piece by piece is really key. So it's almost overwhelming. I know I personally, when I was just starting out my career, was very overwhelmed by the concept of finding a mentor, by surrounding myself with, the right people. And it's a lot. It's a lot to kind of ask someone, hey, can I pick your brain? I want to learn more about what you do, be like you. That's a lot. But I would say, starting off and going back to that curiosity, if there's someone that you see doing something that you might want to do, or someone you see who just really did well, in a meeting, just little by little, stage by stage, reach out and see what comes out of it. It doesn't have to be anything overwhelming. It could be, once a week, I am just going to reach out on social media. I'm going to send an email or a note and say, I really liked that class, or I really liked that talk I saw, and just see what comes out of it. The worst thing that happens is someone responds back and they give you 15 minutes of their time just to pick their brain, and you never know what's going to emerge. And that's probably a less overwhelming way to start a network, is just little measuring, folding in those connections and just seeing what comes out of it. And then before you know it, you do have that network, but you've built it slowly and surely over time, and not in a overwhelming, overactive way that will burn you out even before you start. Because I think that's where people fizzle out before they even kind of get their feet on the ground in their career. So those would be my 2 major pieces of advice.
I want to jump off right at that point and something that Kristine said earlier. And I'm a big believer in get your who right, as Jim Collins says. Before the what, the why, the how is the who. And it goes back to Marge Oddo, my wonderful 86-year-old mother who still lives on Old Town Road, saying, surround yourself with good friends. My best single piece of advice to young people is watch out for your who. Who are you spending time with? Who do you allow in your inner circle? Who are the influences? I take an exercise in the leadership class I teach at Monsignor Farrell. It's the tree friend exercise. There's a tree with 5 branches. I say, name the 5 people you are closest to or spend the most time with. After you do that, 5 attributes of these folks. And then I ask them, do you see any of those things look familiar, sound familiar when you look in the mirror? Because who is around you, what those inputs are, who are your friends, what social media you are on, what cable news, God help us all, turn off the channel, turn off the TV on the cable news. All of those things are the inputs that you internalize and becomes part of you. And you have to be really, really cautious and really smart with your time. And it starts like, who do you want to spend time with? And that influence, I don't think, can be overstated. The second thing I would say is what we've been saying all along about the lifelong learner. Read, and feed that curiosity. And the last thing is, I hit my kids at Farrell with these numbers. We can speak at 125 words per minute. We can listen at 400 words per minute, and we could think at 900 words per minute. So there's a big gap between how many words we are hearing, but what we can process. And what happens during that time? Our minds wander. And we don't teach the skill of listening to kids or to adults. We don't teach it in America. I think the number is like 2% of Americans have been taught to some degree on how to listen. That's a skill. It's like a muscle that you can begin to work on at an earlier age. And it's a skill that you can build up over time. And it is an advantage you will have over your colleagues and your competitors. And it just put it in the toolbox. It's another tool that you want in your toolbox. And lastly, Fred, I looked for it and it was missing. I'm like, they're going to make a liar out of me. And I realized it's actually serving as the shelf for my laptop. But I don't know if you can see this. This is my little box of my thank you notes, Fred.
Yeah.
So you are 100% honor. That used to be a commonplace. And now it's like, oh my God, Fred Cerullo took the time to send me a note. He's so thoughtful. Oh, but that's just Freddie. He's just so thoughtful.
There we go.
Because you don't save a text. You don't save a Facebook post. You don't save a snap. You save a note. I have a letter over my shoulder that someone wrote my great-grandmother when my grandfather was serving in World War II. And it talks about how nice it was to meet him and what a good young man he is, and she should be so proud. You know, so those are the things that you save. And I have a folder, Borough President, in my drawer called the Rainbow Folder, which my first boss started for me. And he said, save every nice note you get, because that is what a career is made of.
I saved them too. I have a lot saved, but it's so meaningful.
Precious.
It's actually, it's not like you're pressing delete or you're filing in some folder that then you'll delete. It's like taking the person and discarding a piece of the person. So it's very difficult to do that. So it's meaningful. That's the message to the students. You know, it matters. You know, it really matters.
And just to build off that too, you know, it goes back to networking, but it also goes back to what do you want to put out there in the world. If ever anyone is struggling with, well, how do I go about building that network? How do I actually find those right people in that inner circle and make sure they have the right characteristics? The litmus test for me has always been, does that person make me feel awesome, but also make me feel challenged at the same time? Are they going to help me and, you know, be real with me and honest, but also do they lift me up and make me feel good? And I think it goes back to, you know, writing cards, putting that out there in the world. You have to think about, are you doing that for others as well throughout your career? And that's so important to not only be surrounding yourself with, but also just put out in the world. You know, you're multiplying that. And imagine just hearing these stories, writing one card that could be saved in someone's file for years to come and totally be pivotal to them. And it's a simple 30 seconds.
All right, well, we have learned a lot today. So students, I hope that you were taking notes, as some of our panelists were themselves. And we hope that you stay connected, listen to what they said, take this advice and really absorb it. We have a lot of great advice here today. Thank you all to all of our panelists. It was wonderful to join you here today.
Thank you, Jenn. Thank you for having
Thanks
us.
for the
Thank you,
invitation.
everybody.
So much.